There we
Okay.
go. We are live.
Perfect. I would like to welcome everyone to Monday, October 21st, a meeting of the African Burial Ground Memorial Park Committee. I am Assistant Mayor Kelly, and we will go around and take roll call. Do you want to take roll call?
Sure.
Deputy City Manager?
Sure. So Sue Sterry,
Yes,
okay,
Here.
member of the Cemetery Committee.
yes, sorry.
And do you want to be our voting member? Well, if we get a quorum before the end.
Sure. Yes, I will be, yeah.
And then Gina,
Black Heritage.
Black
Trail.
Heritage Trail.
And D Forte, substitute for cemetery committee.
Great. Ron.
Perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perspective.
Ron Basis perspective.
And that's a resident. And then on Zoom.
Tanisha Johnson, Black Lives Matter, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then per city staff, we have Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland and
Corin Hallowell.
Yes.
Yeah, Parks Foreman.
Parks foreman. I was like, parks. Perfect. At this time, just for the record, we do not have a quorum in person. The hope is that we will by the time the end of this meeting takes place. So based on that, what we can do is we can skip over the review of and voting on the minutes because we don't have enough people to vote. And we can jump right into update on repairs.
Oh, you want to jump right into that?
Yeah,
We're still
working.
working on the tile situation.
Right, I contacted Dante and they have not forgotten it. They sent me emails. They're still having a hard time finding the tiles at this point. Or anything that's similar, the glass tiles.
Yes, of the size.
Right,
Yeah,
And I think color,
the color is the biggest issue right now.
okay.
The oranges, but again, when I walked with him that day, he said, definitely there are pool tiles that would be perfect for up here. But again, it's the
Finding,
color,
yeah.
the color.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to him last Friday, so it's up to date. And I did research around to see what other tile companies are local, and there aren't any.
Yeah,
Everything is so online now. I can reach out further, but if he doesn't get back within a week, I am gonna look further outside to see what other tile companies
thank you for.
might be
taking that.
available and might have knowledge of where to get tiles.
Thank you. And as an update to our two new, or not new members, two members, just an update on this is, obviously we know our big task right now is the Sankofa, and those tiles and replacing that top part and that design. And so Sue was great and has found initially, a manufacturer company that has basically the same size tile. And now we are trying to figure out if we can order that, get it in a correct color and look at installation, because it seems to be that installation and tile type have been the biggest issues because those are plastic tiles. So what we're hoping is working with Jerome, the original artist, and
Well,
No.
no,
No.
actually,
no, actually, they were actually glass. And they are correct tiles for
Oh.
this area. What's wrong is whoever did the installation, it's not a correct installation. And they're outdoor pool
Yeah.
tiles, they're not indoor. And the weather shouldn't have anything to affect them if they're placed properly. The other ones, he couldn't even come close to getting any of those colors.
Yeah.
And also, Corin and I talked about it briefly, we put some down, it wouldn't have the same effect either. The glass and the colors are pretty unique to
Yeah.
what the look is, so to put in porcelain tiles, they're not gonna look the same as the glass, it's not gonna be
there's not enough contrast
Contrast,
between the other
yeah.
porcelain tile, so you want a different tile. I don't know.
I mean,
He thinks we should put Jerome back on it as well, because he is the artist and he might find something that he is attracted to that he feels would be the proper contrast. He had started doing some research into clay, I think, but it might be helpful to also reignite that and let him go back to his doing some homework.
Right, and we haven't sent him any samples yet,
We haven't been able to get him,
Yeah,
Okay.
we have,
because the color
just as
We-
close,
is really hard, yeah, they're having a hard time finding it, so.
okay,
You know, maybe in the meantime, we say, hey, can you resume your
search.
search? Maybe that will,
Yeah.
something will pop up.
traditionally pool tiles tend to be in the blues and the greens,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, so. I mean, you could get, or we could get tiles made, but that would be extremely expensive, so.
Well, I will say this, one of the things we talked about is the next item, which is the amount of money that we
Yeah.
have in trust right now, which is, at least in September, when I last checked the amount, it was $37,822 and change. So there have been no expenditures from the trust since that time. So I think there's certainly funding to, you know, if we need to further engage Jerome and maybe satisfy some of Jerome's bills and
Mhm.
you know, if we need to pay for a couple of samples or,
Right,
you know,
We have a
there-
little bit of
there's,
wiggle
we have a
room.
little bit of room because there is this resource that we could use. We just have to, you know,
Be
have all
mindful.
the
Yeah.
paperwork for it, get the trustees' approval of it. But, you know, we've done that before.
Okay.
You know, from the historic cemeteries, when we use that other trust for
Right.
the historic cemeteries, it's getting the documentation and then just getting, you know, the city manager sign off.
Hello.
Okay, because then that will help me when I extend the search,
Yeah.
if we need samples of it, okay.
Right, so if there's a small cost to pay samples, just work with Corin
Yeah.
and we can get that documentation, and I think that might help advance this if they know they could be paid for the samples and if Jerome,
Needs to work
Can-
the first time.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Got it.
respectful of the fact that it takes time,
Yeah,
and thank you, Sue,
Thank you.
for your efforts, which are uncompensated,
that's
so
all- no,
appreciate
it's,
it.
and the other downfall, not downfall, but in the trades now, everybody's so short-handed that
Fine.
it takes time to, you know,
Yeah.
people to get back to doing, so.
You know, Corin can probably speak to this, but I think once we get winter weather, more people are in the office, and sometimes that's the catch-up period
Mhm.
to kind of, you know, get people to say, oh, I've got this outstanding request, and
100%.
Yeah.
Everybody's
And so
trying to
that
wrap it
may-
up Right now.
that may help us if we just have a little patience in that project.
Right,
But like I said, I think we've got a little bit of funds to work with to help solve this problem. While I've got you here, I know, Jerome had suggested a potential solution of the pins for the facing that was coming off.
Yeah, and he was supposed to put a proposal together for that.
Okay,
For attaching the metal figures
for the standing figures.
differently, so I touched base with him and see where he's at with that too.
Okay, because we could even do that, even if we can't do the other yet,
Right.
or, you know, we don't have to necessarily do the two together.
I mean, hopefully it all gets done at once when he's here.
can I ask a quick question about the refurbishing,
Yeah.
the road, what kind of material did you call that?
It's called a chip seal.
Chip seal? It would really pop out that if that was returned to,
Well,
Was it black?
It needs it.
The-
road going in.
the
is a
black-
Chip seal pavement,
Yep,
that's.
right
gonna
now,
need to be
everything's sort
redone.
of
That's the
blends
little,
in.
is that the little road coming right off of State Street?
State, yeah, that leads in, and it's kind of got that texture to it,
Okay,
and that's probably this far down. I mean, that's a whole other, I've talked to Dave
Yeah.
DeFosis about potentially helping me get a quote for that from one of the paving companies he works with, so.
I think that would be a good idea as we look at, you know,
Yeah.
the amount of money we have to make these
And
updates.
Yeah,
Maintenance items.
and the figures up front, I think probably do for another
Could we,
wax. I'll have to
could we
get
seal,
tables.
I'm sorry, could we seal it with black instead of having to have a whole?
I don't think so, I think you wanna stick with what's there.
and this may be going a little bit too far or is farther in the future. But isn't that also the entrance for the bank's ATM Is there some way we can partner with TD Bank to maybe offset some costs there?
One can always ask.
Right, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
they're getting a small
You are
benefit,
correct,
Yeah.
there's a
Of it
lot
too.
cars in and out of there.
right?
Yeah.
They're getting a small benefit of it too, I know I drive through that thing all the time,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, it's a good idea.
thank you.
And for the record, we can
Yes.
note that we have a representative from Seacoast African Center here. Jill, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great.
So we are in
We have a quorum now.
quorum, and so you may vote online now. Perfect. So given that, I would look to recall item number 2 real quick. We can keep, I guess that's kind of the update on that.
So
I
hope,
think we just are looking for money, right?
Yeah.
Cause there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to happen in there, like all the letters need to be repainted.
I think, let's start with the items we know that need to
Yeah,
get
the big
done
stuff.
and see if we can clear those up. Meanwhile, I think the committee can look at fundraising or how we might want to approach
Yeah,
contributors to pick up some of the bigger costs that we see. Like I said, we've got 37,000 and change
that dwindles real quick.
quickly.
That's like 2 rounds of paper. Or no. Okay. Well, thank you for the update, and Sue, again, thank you for all your work and trying and doing that. I would go back to item number 2, which is review and approve the draft minutes for the August 5th, 2024, and the September 9th minutes for 2024 meeting. Are there any, did everyone get a chance to look them over in your email? Okay. Are there any motions or anything that would need to be adjusted? Okay. And again, we did not take minutes per se for the October 7th meeting because we didn't have a quorum. So I would look for a motion to approve the minutes from August 5th and September 9th, 2024.
Motion.
Perfect. In a second? Oh, perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. And we just got a little bit of the update of the for item number 4 of the trust funds. So I guess we can, one of the things that we were looking to discuss was some type of collaboration or trying to figure out, we now have a public art committee. Chris Dwyer is here, she's the chair of that committee. Looking at long-term, trying to figure out the best way of coming up with a maintenance plan. And if the general maintenance of this of the park should maybe go to the public art committee. They are funded by capital improvement and projects here in the city, portions of that and portions of other things that the city does. So they have a little bit more revolving funds. And just what, you know, one of the things we were talking about is that while this obviously has a historical relevance in the burial ground, it also has a public art element to it. And so figuring out a way to kind of bring that all together so that we're not running in silos. So I would open that up for any discussion. And Chris, if you have anything you want to say, feel free to come in and join us.
Yeah, we are recording it via Zoom, so. Sorry, I keep spreading. That's not bad habit.
Well, what Joe just said is the discussion we've had that, especially as this committee begins to think more about a role with other sites, other African American related sites in the community, whether it's the Langdon site or others, or even extends to, I know some of you talked about Greenland and some other sites, whether the committee should focus, this committee should focus more on the, you know, the historical aspects of this, burials, the conversation we had last time about DNA testing, et cetera, and whether park should deal on an ongoing basis with maintenance of the public art items themselves. The statues, the mosaic, et cetera. Thinking of going forward. And the park committee is a committee established by ordinance. So it's a standing committee, and it's made up of 11 people who have experience with public art of varying types, whether it's art history or nonprofit arts, etc. So it would be a way for your committee to expand, because as we've talked about, its mission seems to be ready to expand into many of the more historical aspects of it, and of the burial sites that are in our community. And the art elements from a maintenance perspective would be something that then the Public Art Review Committee would handle.
So I would open up the floor for discussion on that. If anyone has any opinions they would like to share, if they just, I know some people are hearing this more thoroughly for the first or second time,
So
so.
Chris, you would handle it by subcontracting, whatever
working with
monument
you.
folks.
Subcontracting, one thing that we hope our committee should be part of its mission, and we put it in the ordinance, is to annually or biannually do an inventory of all the public art from a maintenance perspective, and deal with public works on prioritizing what needs to be done, what's next. And we work with the original artists because, Jerome is an artist we worked with before. So, I know a lot of this is being taken care of right now, but as I came in, you started to talk, once you do one thing, the next thing is right in front of you. And while we don't have a lot of money from the city, we will have an ongoing pool of money for maintenance, and we're also prepared to raise money. That's, you mentioned TD Bank. We raised money before from TD Bank to contribute to the site. We were first doing it. And there is we have a public art trust, and of course there's a trust for this, but this will probably deplete, the work that you're doing now will probably deplete what's in the African bearing grounds.
I think it's important too, and what I see as one of the big benefits of this is the expertise that's on the committee. The ongoing maintenance that is in coalition with the Parks Department that is already doing DPW, that is already doing it. And the members of that committee have long standing relationships with raising money in this community geared towards art. And so to me, I feel like it could be something that is very beneficial. Making sure, again, however this trade-off ends up happening, making sure that if there is ever major repairs or major redesign or any of that, that it comes back to this
Yes.
community
Yeah,
committee in a co-op or like a co-op type of situation.
yeah,
Is it Chris?
yes.
Hi, Chris, I'm Ron. I have a question for you. Are there elements to the site now that are considered art and those that aren't considered art, and what would they be?
I think, except for probably the Chet McAdam, I was considering all of it art, but that could again be something we could talk about and define, but certainly the statues that represent the people of Portsmouth, the ceramic tiles, the petition line, the statues at the top, the vault covers, and hopefully we never have to do anything with these, but there were artists who also did the reburial boxes themselves that we don't see. So those are kind of the major art elements.
Okay. And if your committee, if this were to fall under your committee's auspices,
Then we would have done what you all have struggled with over the last, and we would have struggled with it over the last couple of weeks.
now would you be instituting a person from your committee into our committee, like you would have a representative on our committee? Or would our committee dissolve or?
No, your committee wouldn't dissolve, because I see it kind of moving into some other purposes that people have talked about over the last couple of meetings of, you know, shepherding some of the other burial sites that exist and some of the headstones, grave markers, as well as other sites in the community. I don't think
Yeah,
that
so
conversation is
So
happening.
that's on the agenda. One of the
Oh, okay,
things
I'm
we're
sorry.
talking, no, it's okay, it's okay.
No.
One of the things we'll discuss further down is actually kind of broadening the mission of this committee.
Okay,
So that we are not just at the burial, at the memorial burial site here, but we know of at least 1 to 2 more sites within Portsmouth that are enslaved or freed Black American sites that we would like to look into and figure out how we can more encompass that into the role. And also we've looked at maybe adding Indigenous peoples to our mission and looking at some of the prominent and non-prominent African American headstones in our
Yeah.
cemeteries already in town. And looking kind of broader scope of what we can do with this committee.
oh, awesome.
So it might be really useful to have members on both, or to meet occasionally,
Yeah,
you know, as two committees together. And I would say this has not been discussed yet with the park committee, but, you know, coming here first. The other, in addition to maintenance, of course, the other mission that we have is commissioning, and I could see connecting with this committee on commissioning, you know, future work, and promotion. So we're doing an inventory of public art, we'll be putting it in a national registry, things like that. So it's like all things related to public art sort of find their way to that group, and that's where the intersection is.
To me, the big question is, since I'm on cemetery, but is this a cemetery or is it a memorial?
Yeah.
I mean, even at our own cemeteries, the historic ones, I mean, we do all the repairs there and similar to the Sankofa, you know, painting, you know, repairing headstones and those sort of things. But this is sort of like a unique situation.
It is.
So it covers both.
Oh, it does.
And it's always been separate from the rest of the city as far as our historic cemeteries and burial grounds. So to me, as a citizen, having lived here and everything, it's really a confusing site.
yeah.
And so,
And people think different organizations actually own it and like, oh, I want to do something, and then we contact Black Heritage Trail and we contact Saks and we contact,
right.
yeah, and it's like,
And-
no, it's city.
Right, and I don't think it's well publicized, I mean, that it's a burial ground.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people come and look and say, well, it's a memorial to
That's right.
African American. I don't think they know that there's more people buried to the
All the
west.
way up.
Right, so I don't know.
And maybe
It's a difficult,
Well, that's-
Maybe that becomes.
It's a really good point, and that's, you know, explicitly why we called it the burying ground, because that happens so often during
yeah,
the development of it. The people, even people who were here when the coffins were discovered,
Mhm.
then somehow didn't realize, yes, there are actually people buried here, which is to me, that is I'll call it the money stream and the money obligation, because if it's a cemetery, there's a municipal obligation to maintain it. And, you know, so that's where these things come together. You know, the art part of it, whether it's this committee or our park committee responsible to maintain it, but there's also you know, from RSAs, there's an obligation to maintain.
well, I mean, I sat on the archive committee, you know, hopefully we're gonna get a new archive, you know, 15 years down the road, where all information, but our cemeteries really are an outdoor archive.
Mhm.
And they're older than what our archives are here. And they represent the history in lots of fashion, including art. So,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, this is, and so this cemetery just has a different representation instead of actual headstones. It has the interpretation of
Right.
what the burying ground is, so. Now, is the Arts Committee is part of the city of Portsmouth though, right?
It's an ordinance committee,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it was created,
right,
2 years ago now.
About a year ago,
About a year ago.
and actually, well, you don't think of it this way, partly because most of the public art in Portsmouth has been created on private space. We have over 60 pieces of public art, and we'll have more coming because we have some big commissions coming. So that's why the committee was developed. And partly, all these things have a life and they deteriorate. And you need to pay attention to them.
I mean, from a public works perspective, I would welcome Park to be the guide on what needs what, when, and how, and so forth. I'm like the boy with the dam, I'm just
Yeah, I know.
like,
Plugging and
stretched
plugging.
out,
And we're making more for you to,
and you're making more.
yeah.
Which is great, which is great, but it also seems appropriate to have that as a sort of guide for me or for us, the DPW, to say, hey, these are your priorities. This is how we want to do it, and also to be a connection to the artists who create these pieces. I think would be really helpful as well.
could it be like what we do now in the cemetery for projects for repair? I mean, Corin oversees it all, but we go out and get bids and outside people come in and do the work. Wouldn't it just be the same if you need to work down there, you'd
A
ask
little bit, but
the,
it gets a little
the
bit
art-
tricky with
It's a little
art
tricky.
because it's so
Yeah.
specific to the artist and also some of the materials and
no, but I mean, we can just ask them to take on that project?
Park, you mean?
No, Parks would still oversee everything,
Right,
but when
Well, I think
it's
we're getting
something-
confused because I'm Parks and Greenery, you're Park.
yeah, it's.
Public art review.
It's the wrong-
So we're
Public
not-
art review,
It's a
yeah.
bad.
Ah.
So just call me DPW, so
Yeah.
Public
Well,
Works. So
Yeah,
from,
DPW and
Which
the
is-
Public Art Review Committee.
which is
Right.
Park.
But it would work exactly like you're saying, Sue,
Yeah.
that just like, we just did an RFP for a commission. I could see us helping with through procurement. I mean, we
Right.
don't handle the money ourselves.
Right, yeah,
We specify and procurement does it
Yeah.
and Public Works oversees.
and that's what we
Exactly.
do too,
Exactly.
we do the research and give it to Corin and Suzanne.
I have a comment to make,
Mhm.
and that's because I've born and raised in this city for many years. I would like to see a list, if we have anything, that's apropos to African Americans in this city, because I don't know of anything yet. The African American Burial Ground was the biggest one that we had, and have been working with Valerie ever since that time, and now with SAC, and with Vernon Jackson, whose idea this sort of became one. I think it's important. I think what you're saying is really important, but I don't want anything to be neglected, especially those of a different cultural nature, even though they may be quote unquote natives of Portsmouth. So is there any way in which we can get a total list, or at least a list that we know that we are aware
Of
of?
sites.
Of sites.
Of
Yes.
sites, yeah, we,
I have.
yeah. Yeah, we kind of have an unofficial running of
Okay,
those,
can you
but
share that?
yeah, we can do that.
We can talk.
I have a completed, updated list of all the cemeteries in Portsmouth, including, that includes the African Memorial, but also the one up behind the church.
Right, and
And,
on Lafayette Road.
right, and as soon as it's confirmed the other two cemeteries are there,
Mhm.
however they're gonna be named, they'll go right on the list.
There is also a gentleman who Valerie asked me to look up a couple of years ago. And he's buried at a Catholic cemetery, he's buried at St. Mary's. I can't remember his name right now, but so I would just like to know if we can get names, because some of them are not gonna be in the area in which we expect them to be.
That's
So-
what
Where they are
it's.
grouped.
And that's one of the
Yes.
discussions, one of the reasons and motivations behind changing kind of the work of this committee to not be isolated at the burial ground and looking at expanding our awareness of African Americans, enslaved or freed people, and potentially indigenous people in those sites in our in our community.
Right now, we generated a map that you can go on. It's not up on the cemetery site, but you can click on number 40 or 37. It will pop up and say it's the Whidden Cemetery located on Lafayette Road, and here's who you contact. And we're just waiting to get it up online. And then also, the only cemeteries that won't be listed in a database that hopefully will be done, list every single person that's buried in the cemeteries here in Portsmouth. So if Calvary and the Temple would like to, they already have their databases, would like to give that information to us, it will be downloaded. So hopefully by November, you can go to the library site, click on any cemetery, and you'll be able to find out information about it. And that includes,
Yeah.
We might not have names, as we don't have names behind
Yeah.
the rectory, but it will be listed and know who to contact.
One of the things I think, Sue and Suzanne and some other people, including obviously the Black Heritage Trail, have been working with too is, I think a good example is Dinah Whipple is finding, what you can consider historical figures that have been, I wouldn't say written out of, but barely written into history that are prominent figures in our area. And I mean, Dinah Whipple now is gonna have a headstone for the first time. The hope is to maybe identify more peoples of that nature and try to honor them and to bring back, bring in that history.
And not only are we getting it, Dee's been working on getting the headstone and everything, and she worked with the family to see what they wanted on it. But Suzanne and I had talked about, and I think Joe, about having a real dedication when that comes, to invite people. Because the family wanted to sort of get it done sooner, but we couldn't because of the headstone. So we would invite a lot of different organizations and the mayor and everything to come and have
We talked about
a really dedication.
When was the last time we, have done at least in Portsmouth, a huge dedication to an African-American woman who had such an impact on that community in her time period. And so, trying to find more case studies like that, as you said, and finding more locations. I mean, there's people in this room who knew about the graveyards over behind the Episcopal Church and the Langdon Farm on the back end of the urban forestry. But when I bring it up to random people in public, they're like, what are you talking about?
I was dumbfounded at the last meeting. When
Yeah,
you
how-
said there were two more.
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded.
Yeah, so there is, because right now, as everyone knows or should know, PHA is working with the Episcopal Church to develop that plot. And so part of that is them doing some of the location work, and that's part of that, their site mitigation, permitting and work with the city is acknowledging those places and following state RSAs. And there's a couple more. There's one pretty well, as we talked about, defined burial ground, but there's a couple more that are popping up as they're finding their research. We can turn this around. But yes, we are, to go off what you're saying, Joe, we are working on trying to acknowledge more. Again, that really goes into expanding the role of this group. And part of expanding the role of this group is taking away a part that maybe we're not potentially as equipped to handle, i.e. the maintenance, the physical maintenance and the maintenance plan of the art and any maybe future art that is, commissioned at these sites. So I'll just pass this around so everyone can look at it. You'll see, and we can send this, she's present, okay. I was like, she looks very studious. You'll see, the markers in red are probable unmarked burial. So there's some more, work that's going into this.
So maybe just to wrap this up, I mean, what we're sort of, what I'm hearing
for.
is that possibly Park would be willing to take on and assist with some of the, and I really want to use the word maintenance, because it's not the new art there, which I think would want to come back to this committee, to the descendant community for any change, but simply working with the artist and the contractors who can help maintain, and DPW, of course, to help really maintain what is already there for art. I don't think it's a
Yep.
yeah, that word, of the responsibility of this community, this committee, in terms of representing the community. But really providing some expertise in the day-to-day maintenance or year-to-year maintenance, plus that fundraising piece, because they're already looking for money for art. And kind of just leveraging some of their sort of skill set and connection. So I think that's the distinction of really, it's not the new art, which I think would come back here if there were some new art element and big change because of the nature of the specialness of this site. Does that sound about right,
Yeah,
Chris?
I have a hard time imagining new art at this point on
Yeah.
that site. But, you know,
Yeah.
who knows? And one thing I've noticed is, unless it's changed recently, the signs that used to be along the houses, I think, are
Yeah.
some here, some not
Some
here
there.
anymore. We've redone those twice and,
Yeah.
you know, things like that, a decision of do we do, they told the story, which was a
Mhm.
good part of it, told the history. Was a Sankofa with a little bit of a history below it, and there were, I think, five.
Mhm.
Yeah, 5 signs, you know, and that would be an example of, maybe that should be done in a different way to be able to.
I somehow recall that was only supposed to be
Well,
temporary.
It was temporary, and then Public Works did a more permanent job of the
Right,
signs.
we had them remade like 5 or 6
You
years.
had them remade about, yes, but originally it was, the temporary nature was before there was anything there, it was to tell people what was there.
Yeah,
And so each of the houses had a sign, and if you read them all, you could get the history. But that would be an example of, you know, maybe this committee decides there needs to be more, history represented in a plaque or something like that, that would be somewhere, you know, adjacent, or maybe TV bank, you know, something like that. That I would see would be something that this committee would talk
would be
about
part of it,
wanting.
yeah.
Chris, what's the budget for park for your,
What's our budget for park? So we have money that comes from percent for art commissions, and so, for example, we just commissioned, we had 140,000 to commission a piece for Pierce Island. That was a specific piece. And then right now we're getting 25,000 a year from capital improvement plan. And then, you know, our other obligation is then to start raising.
and your other obligation? Okay, so you're on a fundraising campaign too, less 25K a year. Okay,
But that'll probably be for specific projects, because it's, you know, nobody wants to give you money for maintenance. But for specific projects, for example, we really need to finish the Bohenko Park. It's got
right,
2 pieces now, but it needs additional pieces.
right. So park your 25K budget. And that's over 60 projects you have in the city.
Well, those are not all our projects. Most
But
of them are
you
from private
maintain-
developers. And so
The public
we
up to 60.
maintain, the city would, we would maintain the city development. So
City. How
um,
many is that?
I can't even tell you that, but the Gundalo project that's off Route 7, for example, the codfish that just went in.
Yep.
Okay. There are really not very many city developed projects. They're almost all private, but we hope to
I
have
mean,
more.
yeah, it's interesting because it's like we have
You
art
want more.
pieces and then we have memorials. Like the soldiers and sailors in Goodwin, that I had
Right.
done
That's right.
5 or 6 years ago, it was thousands of dollars.
That was a big project, yeah,
You know, so there's sort of all. You know,
yeah.
And we do have
there's
some
plaques
money,
that I had redone.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there's some money in the operations side, which
Yeah.
pays
Right.
for Corin's salary
Right.
and that of some of his staff, and that covers though a wide range of park maintenance
And usage.
obligations.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will, so thank you so much, Chris. We'll let the committee kind of think it over and then we will.
And we'll present it to our committee as
Yes,
well.
yeah, so, we'll hear back from what your committee thinks and kind of make sure, and then we'll flesh this out over the next few months to see if it is something that, the committee members are comfortable with. Welcome back. I don't know if we froze on you, but, okay, so then the next topic, I'm the worst. I don't know why people give me the agenda I have the ADHD, just take things over. Is the review of stipulations related to the burial site at 1035 Lafayette Road.
So that we've sort of touched on a little bit. There's an approved site plan for improvements, including some affordable housing. At 1035 Lafayette Road, and as part of the stipulations of approval were requirements for the developer, in this case, Portsmouth Housing Authority, to take certain actions to understand what was buried, the burial site. And that was the picture you saw here, which is, of course, no surprise, burials likely extend beyond the defined walls. So they did ground penetrating radar already, so there is a study that we have, and then they have obligations to protect those sites. And we have someone on staff in the planning department who is responsible for making sure that all of those stipulations are followed. First, that we have the documentation in our system in terms of the plan and where things are, and then that person goes out on site at various times during the project to see that the stipulations are being followed. So that's kind of in a nutshell, for that project. It also does include, as I understand it, some, when the project kind of moves a little further along in the process, easements, to make it clear that the public can come and visit the site. As well as I think they even have some parking spaces open to the public, so not just for the affordable housing folks and other activities that happen on that site, to try and make sure that there's access. I think we'd also need to talk eventually about signage. There was a fairly lengthy kind of report of the ground penetrating radar and some of the other history and findings, and Kathy Wheeler, who was formerly with Independent Archaeological Consulting. She was here when we tried to meet last week or 2 weeks ago? She came. And she now has a copy of all those reports because she was involved a lot in the African burying ground here on Chestnut Street. So she was gonna take a look at it, on the thought that if there's anything that she sees in there that might help, inform sort of how we keep an eye on things. She was gonna take a look at it and, just give us, any feedback relative to the site. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I'm mindful of time. I'll just kind of stop there.
And part of what was in your email packet was her notes that discussed the summary of the archaeological investigation and results from 2001 to present day. So there's a lot of information as we talk about, the graves that go and the bodies that go all the way up and kind of all of that. And it's really interesting. So if you want to, this is in your packet, her kind of general timeline.
Who did the assessment out there? It doesn't matter.
She said it, she was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know off the
Oh,
top
that's
of my
okay.
head.
Gosh.
Oh, wait,
But
it's
I
on
can-
here.
yes,
Heritage
yes.
Consultants.
Thank you.
I was like,
Okay.
this is how we discovered
Right.
last time.
Yeah.
Here.
That's right.
Heritage Consultants.
Yep.
So we'll look forward to kind of, I guess, a review back of what she kind of thinks.
And Kathleen Wheeler is willing to come to a future meeting so that as we, are noodling over, either steps at African burying ground that you might find, any of her background useful. She's willing to be part of that conversation, or as you talk about Lafayette.
Yeah. And she's done great work with the city, obviously with this, and then also North Cemetery.
Yeah.
She's done some good work with the city in this arena. It's what she does.
Yeah, she's retired
Yeah,
now,
well, she
but, so she's more than willing to come back and as we need her to have her input, so.
Okay.
Retirement just means you work for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, or city council, one of the two.
Yeah.
And I will say, in case you were interested, also with the notes, Kathleen Wheeler's notes, I did put some of the approved minutes from the prior committee meeting, so that you could just have an idea of some of the history. And I think when we're ready, because I don't know if we want to jump into it now, but it's probably worth a good meeting where really that is our primary
Yeah.
piece, which is to look at sort of all the work that was done and different options about what, if anything, you want to do with, you know, the few remains that have been set aside, the dental pieces.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's our next agenda item, but I feel like that really needs
A lot of time.
a lot of time, our voting members here and a lot of discussion. And getting and reaching out proactively to some of the larger boards to kind of make sure that, you know, SAC is 100% on board, Black Heritage Trail, BLM Coast, to make sure, you know, you bring this back to your boards in respective as being representative
I
of
took
them.
part in a activity with Kathy.
Yes.
It was a big discussion back then.
Yeah, and I assume it's gonna be a pretty big,
Um,
big discussion now.
Yeah,
I reached out to UNH
Yep.
because I'm working with them on yellow fever in North Cemetery, and I actually met Amy. She was on a
Mhm.
couple of the digs, so she's still. I mean, I don't know, she's still involved up in UNH. If when we get to that point, if we might want to invite her again
Yeah. And I know
for any updates on, you know, what's out there
Testing,
for testing
And I
and
know
that sort of thing.
one of the other original archaeologists who was on the dig, Steve, I can't think of his name, he lives over in Elliott, is interested in, you know, coming back and discussing it too. So we'll make sure that,
Yeah.
I would assume probably, because that's gonna be pretty hefty, but maybe after the holidays or maybe early
Mhm.
December, January, when you can really focus in and make some big decisions and then report back out to the committees through the representatives.
yeah, I think what would be useful is just look at the material that was provided in the past and start to frame questions.
Right.
And who would be helpful to the discussion, because we had the archaeological team, if you will, from UNH, who provided a lot of input in terms of different options from just what can be done. And then you may recall, I'm sure you were there, the last meeting where we actually had Dr. Zaid.
See,
Forget which university she was from in the Midwest.
Midwest, yeah.
And she provided, you know, she's one of the few Black archaeologists, you know, in this field. And she kind of provided a very different and I thought useful kind of perspective in terms of how to tell the story and kind of just a different voice into, you know, kind of looking at kind of the site and, you know, do you want to do testing or how else could you tell the story of those who were there? And so I just thought it was nice to have that other, it's, again, it was a different kind of view in. And so I think both are valuable, and I think that's why if you look at the material, including I'd thrown on here the April 14th, 2021 minutes, draft minutes that never got final because we couldn't get the committee together again with all the complications of COVID, et cetera. And you'll see in there kind of the summary of kind of what she shared. And I think it's just useful to kind of really dive into that material, because I think if you look at it in advance, you can even, you know, just catch up with Joe or me and just say, you know, it would be nice to kind of tease this out a little more so that when we have the conversation, if there's more information we can provide coming in, then we could do that. Or how do we frame the
But I think that's
Good
an
questions.
important conversation as we move into the mission and potentially a cooperative type of relationship with Park. Is making sure that, you know, if we want to change the way that these stories are being told, or, you know, a story at whether that is the story over at Langdon or the story at the burying ground, if we want to, you know, to me, I, you know, when I heard that there were something upwards of, you know, over 100, you know, people's potentially buried in that's a fact that I never knew. That to me is saying, you know, we should really look at, again, the way that we discuss this narrative throughout time. But again, please review this, we'll come back. That is a whole meeting in itself to really kind of look over the pluses, the minuses, the tasks that can be done. And whether the committee and the cost attributed to that. 37,000 sounds like a lot of money until you start doing advanced repairs and testing and then that, you know what I mean? So again, we have to weigh certain things. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Suzanne or myself, and or if you just want to say like, what if we did this? You know, I read this, what do you think? All of that can be done.
Real quick, did I let you know that it's confirmed down back where supposedly the 4 people were buried at North? There are people buried there. I don't know if I could.
Oh, yes, on the, like, on the
On the
wall.
water's edge, I couldn't
Yes.
remember.
Yeah, we talked about it the last one.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's possibility, there's more,
sites back.
yeah, free Africans or slaves were
Yes.
buried there.
So moving along to what we've kind of touched on because which is the potential adjustment of the mission of this
drafts.
committee. We have a couple drafts here.
You go this way. I go-
There's already
This
some
is really what-
language we're looking at that would
Yeah.
be different. Right now, as written, it says the committee is dedicated to preserving and honoring the final resting places of enslaved and indigenous peoples. We strive to safeguard these sacred sites through respectful stewardship, community engagement, and educational initiatives. Our mission is to ensure that these hallowed grounds are protected for future generations, recognizing their profound historical and cultural significance. I like the everything, just my opinion as of now, everything from we strive on works for me. In the top, I would like, you know, we can potentially add the word Black, of enslaved and freed peoples.
That's what I freed was.
Yeah. You know, people identify, as we know, people, the Browns, identify across the board of different, some people identify as African American, some people identify as Black. But definitely the places of enslaved and freed, Black or African Americans. The question is, do we want to add and do we want to take on indigenous peoples? Is a question. Right now, there is not much work outside of Strawberry Bank to acknowledge really the indigenous peoples that were here. You know, so what that would entail, I'm not sure. But to me, it kind of almost felt right for someone to claim to take care of that history. If we ever find something outside in a public realm and all of that.
Well, I talked to the Mark Drobolowski about indigenous grave sites, and there are in this area, but they're not public.
No,
None of it's public, so I mean, there's information out there on,
yeah,
so I don't know if it's confidential or, I mean, I didn't go that far in
yeah.
conversation.
I think culturally, the way that different indigenous cultures, you know, dealt with death and in their burials and non-burials, you know, that's a different world for us. But again, I mean, I'm only one vote on this committee. I felt like there was nobody in the public realm, right, in our sector of the city, taking any ownership. If anything ever did come forward, if that meant that, you know, something did come forward, they would at least have a body to come to, and then maybe we're sending them somewhere else or figuring out through council or RSAs of how that is dealt with. But it just gives a home
Exactly.
for a people to land if something happens.
I don't have any problem with that. I think that also during the meantime, we need to find an organization
Yeah.
for the indigenous people who we can consult with rather than waiting till that time when we.
Yeah, we do have I mean, there is the New Hampshire Indigenous, the NHIC. Alex Martin, she's the archaeologist at Strawberry Bank. Great, good, she's young and part of the indigenous peoples here in New Hampshire, and she does do a lot of that. They put on the big powwow last year. They kind of deal with.
And we have people that we've worked with.
Yes.
To
the Twilios.
Yep, the Kawasaki band, the Kawasaki peoples.
Know their organization, I just know them.
Yes.
They're my
Holiday
contact there.
Folio.
Um,
So there are connections,
yeah.
but again, there's no, I just look at it city-wise, our take is as the local government and we're taking care of one group. There's not a huge indigenous population left in this area, as we know. And so, just to make sure that at least there's a city contact. So if something happens,
I like that and that we're making it clear that it's not that we're saying we're necessarily doing anything. It's that people can come to us if they found something and then we will then reach out and to the organizations, the
Yeah.
other organizations. And say, hey,
yeah,
somebody has found something,
yes.
what would you like to do?
Yeah, we're the safeguard of making sure
Yeah.
that that information gets
Like
out in
if-
the community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you all stop what you're doing, don't do anything more to it,
yes,
let us figure out what's happening and then move forward from there.
There are state statutes, very specific to indigenous sites. A whole section of state chapters, so that's why the state archaeologist would be particularly sensitive to this, and that UNH archaeologists have been working on several sites in the state of New Hampshire. So this is an area which they are pretty involved in, and have done some, I think, good work from what I hear. And yeah, so just so you're aware, there's a whole volume of what to do when you think you found a site. And I will say to Sue's point, and Kathy Wheeler kind of points this out as well, is that historically, there's a sensitivity of releasing information relative to archaeological investigations on property where you're leaving stuff in the ground, because you don't want that information public in some instances, because you don't want people not authorized to then start digging for, items
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
Belong
would be
still in the ground.
inappropriate. So, yeah. So that's why there's kind of a sensitivity point, once you know you're going to open it up and it's gonna be public and, seen and it, dissuades people from a certain, when it's, as, on Chestnut Street,
Yeah.
probably no one's gonna be digging. But when you're in more remote sites, which don't have the kind of oversight, there's a much more sensitivity to being careful about what you disclose in your archaeological reports. You kind of blur the area so you don't make it easy for someone to act wrongfully for these sites.
Plus, he indicated too that I asked him about it and he goes, he didn't say they were a nightmare, but they're very difficult situations to handle because it's not just state, there's also federal
Right.
and all kinds of things, so.
For what it's worth, if we're gonna have more of this conversation, certainly if the UNH archaeological
team
team
be
is
here.
interested in kind of providing at some point any update on
Yeah.
what they're doing and their experience. They might be willing to come and share or do it by teams and so.
The mission of the committee is not a vote for today.
No,
right?
no,
Okay, thank you.
nope. No, because we would like your vote. Well, please, if you, again, feel free.
Draft.
Yeah, this is very draft, so if you want to wordsmith and send this over, obviously, if we discussed including the words freed, if we want to add the words African American or Black or both, we can do that. But we just wanted to get this out here and really discuss again the growing mission of this committee outside of any maintenance of the burial ground, because that has been a huge amount of topic of this group. Any other business, anything,
If we have a quorum,
yes,
if the committee would be willing to approve the draft minutes that I prepared back for the April 14th, 2021, it was a success. It was the predecessor
Oh, yes.
committee.
yes,
Just because that way I'll put them up on the website and make
Close
sure
them
that
out.
they're available. Because you don't actually have to be in a meeting if you have some level of confidence that the minute taker, and it's a
Yeah.
housekeeping matter for you. It would just allow me to
Close them out.
close them out, and I would be happy to do that.
Okay. So then I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of the April 14th, 2021 African Burial Ground Stewardship Committee.
Motion.
And I just need a second.
I second.
Perfect. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you for letting me close those out.
That's my long time ago. Probably,
Are you gonna send out yes?
yeah, so if,
Oh,
Can we, I just want to, because Daria's not here, I just want her to be able to see it.
yeah, and I'm okay sending if you'd like to see the entire report, I'm
Mhm.
okay with that, with the recognition of, please don't forward it on without checking with us.
I just
Okay.
want Daria to have an idea.
Okay.
yeah,
I
We're
can
sort
make
of
you a
talking
copy
about.
before you leave.
Oh, yeah,
I
that
would
would be
love
great.
it to full
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
I don't need the full report.
Yeah,
Just-
and I wanna make sure that also we know that while this is being investigated, that we would, I guess, ask the public not to just go. Please leave your shovels at home, please do not go looking, there are trusted contractors and state regulations that are being followed very closely to make sure we recognize these sites. Cause I'm nosy and I just go walk around. I'm getting it. Okay, if there's any other business? Okay, then I would open up for public comment. Seeing no takers in the room, I would look for a motion to adjourn. Do we
Oh,
know what our
next
next
meeting.
meeting? Both of us at the same time, wait. And just confirming that on average, 4 o'clock on Mondays, whether via Zoom, as long as we have a quorum in public.
In person.
In public, it's all in public, in person. That 4 o'clock on Mondays still relatively work for everyone? Okay. So looking at
I believe is.
Maybe the
my
18th.
calendar.
Oh, because we have a council meeting.
Scheduled.
It's gonna be the third week of every month primarily.
That's what we've been going for,
You know,
so that's why I thought we had it
I thought we did too, but
I
I
thought we
don't see
discussed
one
the
on my calendar.
18th.
I thought you had selected the first because sometimes it does butt up to the city council meeting.
Yeah, we have a council meeting that day.
We
Uh,
don't on November 4th, we don't,
No,
because we have the election on the 5th.
oh, yeah, and the
I
11th,
think that's why November was
Was it?
wonky
Yeah.
because. So I would say,
because we only have,
Tuesday, the 12th would be a long day for City Hall. November 11th is Veterans Day, so we're closed that day. There's no city council meeting that night.
I am not here on the 12th.
And then
The 18th
is
is the,
our council meeting.
yeah,
So you could do the 18th at 4 o'clock, November 18th at 4 o'clock.
Beautiful.
does that
Okay,
work for you? Okay,
November
perfect,
18th.
I guess that's fine.
Do we want to set a December date while everyone has their calendars?
Sure.
That way, it just helps people, I think
Does
maybe.
does the first or the third, is there a preference between the first or the third?
I think the third's better because there's so much,
At
not
the
just
front
here, it's
loaded.
not at the first of the month, there's
Yeah.
a lot of organizations that.
Would that work for your schedule to do like the 16th?
The 16th of December looks fine,
Okay,
city council meeting, so that works.
and how
I'll
does?
be here,
Never leave it. How does that feel for everyone else?
December 16th.
December 16th.
Yes,
It worked
it's
for
the
me.
third
Thank
Monday.
Yep.
Perfect. And again, if there is, we do have the ability to add a couple more residents on this committee. So if there's anyone that you feel would be interested, please just let us know and Suzanne or myself can talk to them. Yeah, Dave, you can hop on as a regular. Making sure they understand the commitment is, about 2 hours a month in kind of 3 hours a month if you do your research stuff
Right.
behind. And that we're looking at probably the third Monday of the month for meetings. So with all of that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Seconded.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much for all making it. Thank you very